All right, so I just want to introduce my spiritual warrior friends here. And the idea here is that everybody really is a spiritual warrior. Whether, we're not here on this planet to eat, bacteria eats, even a plant eats. But eventually that dies. That's not what we're here for. We're actually here, as the Holy Baal Shem Tov, one of the greatest Jewish masters, teaches us we're spiritual warriors. We're in a spiritual war, and that's really what it is. If you want to know what's going on, there's a lot of chaos in the world, but it's actually all very simple. It's a spiritual war. And I know, Steve, I'm just going to briefly introduce my illustrious crowd here. I've got Steve Roth, who's been a celebrity trainer. He's trained Chuck Norris, Madonna, many celebrities. We have Esti. She's a very celebrated artist, beautiful, beautiful art, and a wonderful lady. We have Esther Chava, who is an actress and a singer, and most importantly, a very special soul on her path of discovery. And what we all have in common, really what all people have in common, is that we're all spiritual warriors. We're here and we have Yetzer Hara, we have a negative side in us, and we have, of course, our own essence, which is God, which is the positive side. And this is very interesting because when God made the world, he created the good, and he said, this is good. And then he created the bad, and he says, this is very good. So how could God say about the bad, this is very good? The answer is because in order to progress in life, it's just like if you're playing a video game. You're never going to go for what keeps millions, hundreds of millions of people playing video games? That there's a challenge. So challenges, even though a lot of us try to stay away from challenges are the greatest things that could ever happen to you. You know why? Because they challenge you. And after the challenge, you become stronger, you become better. So this idea is really about doing two things. It's about opening up a conversation that we should all realize that we are spiritual warriors and that it makes sense that we're in this planet. We're here to grow, and that's what we're doing. We're growing. So we shouldn't get depressed or despondent if something didn't work out, because it's all part of growth. Every single thing that happens in life is just your next stage of growth. That's what it is. In fact, the Baal Shem Tov says that whenever you see anything, you hear anything, even if it's, let's say, an advertisement or whatever happens, there's a lesson in that. So even though physically that thing may have happened in the physical realm, there's simultaneously a spiritual realm going on. These two realms don't have to contradict each other. A lot of people think, oh, I'm either spiritual or I'm physical. No, you're both. You're in a physical world and you're in a spiritual world. Now, there is freedom of choice. If you want to ignore the spirituality, you can do that. But if you want to embrace the spirituality, then every moment you're going to grow, you're going to become better, you're going to become nicer. And that, of course, will mean you'll become more lovable, which is what we all want in any event. So this is a beautiful concept. So I want to open up the concept to people to see themselves as spiritual warriors. And second of all, because I know that each one of us, in a way, are spiritual warriors. We're already kind of spiritual people, if you want to call it, progressed a little bit in the journey. So we're going to share personal stories about the most greatest spiritual war or achievement that we've had. Obviously, we're not doing this in a narcissistic way. It's just we're all here to grow, and we all go through challenges. So by me sharing some challenge that I overcame, there will be somebody else in the audience that will say, hey, I also had a challenge like that. And I'll empower the other person to overcome that challenge. So without further ado, Chava, Esther, can you maybe share with us something that, I don't know, you've overcome and maybe other people could benefit from?
Sure. So the first thing that you mentioned was that we aren't just here like other organisms to just eat. Like we have a greater purpose than just like taking things in. We can also like put things out. And I think like one of the bigger challenges that I've overcome in life was actually like with food. When I was in college, I was pursuing a degree in musical theater with the goal of eventually being on Broadway. And it like a part of it never really felt right. But I think what kind of wrapped up the deal to get out of it was a conversation that we had my sophomore year. And one of my teachers was saying, you know, you all really should be going to the gym. And Steve, I'd actually be really interested to hear your perspective on this because I know you've done training. But basically she said, you know, you should all be going to the gym. You should all be eating a certain way. And the line that kind of did it for me was because your bodies are your product. And I was like, ooh, that does not settle right with me. Like, I really don't like that. But I didn't really know at the time. So at the time, something just clicked in me that made it like very extreme. And I was like, oh, if I want to be successful, then my body is my product. I need to look a certain way. So because I didn't really know how to do that in a super healthy way, I went to the extreme and just developed a really unhealthy relationship with food and my body and exercise. And that, with other reasons, kind of steered me away from pursuing acting. But then it took a few years until, because that was probably 4 years ago now. It wasn't really until recently, and learning more about like making blessings over food and learning that within like, especially like with kosher food as Jews, like there's literal like sparks of holiness inside of it. And when we make blessings, that it like goes back to like the Garden of Eden and how like the first disconnect between man and God had to do with food, and how like a huge part of the healing process for us is to develop healthy relationships with food and like elevate them so we can elevate our bodies. So although that was like a very unpleasant period of time in my life where it was something that was so necessary, food is obviously necessary for existence, and I thought it was just this evil thing. Now, because of that challenge, I look at it in such a different way, and I see it as something that can be so healing and not just necessary, but like something that should be enjoyable. So yeah, I guess that challenge, I think everyone can kind of deal with like food or like self-image in different ways, and having to, you know, like what the media tells us we have to look like, rather than just like really loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves and enjoying the things that we do, like enjoying exercise, enjoying food and drink, and knowing that we're like feeding ourselves spiritually as much as we are physically in the process.
Wow, Esther Chava, that was really, really great. And I know that I think that challenge probably a lot of women go through, because, you know, we're unfortunately, when I think it's like either we're living in real times or fake times. And when people are living in real times, it's about you, which is your soul, your emotions, your goals. And when we're living in fake times, it's about your image. It's like, but that's all fake. That's not really real. And so I think that's awesome. I just want to add one comment, something that our listeners could really gain from. The Rebbe says that those that follow the kind of spiritual path, every time you take a bite of food, say thank you. So, and I'll share this also, I might have shared it with you, but my mother's friendly with a lady from the FDA, Food and Drug Administration in America. And this is amazing, because when they break down food to the smallest particle possible, if that's what these people do, all that is left is a point of light. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov says, that when you say a bracha, when you say a blessing, the spark of God in that food, because everything that exists has a spark of God that makes it exist, it goes from the food into your soul. He says that's how a soul, which is a spirit being, can get nourishment from a physical being, because actually when we say thank you to God, that spark of God goes from the food into our soul. So I don't want to go too much. I think your story is awesome. And I just want to say congratulations. I think that's really impressive, and I hope a lot of people learn from it. Without further ado, Esti, is there something that you would like to share?
I think I need to preface it first by saying that I'm not comfortable at all talking in a public forum. So if I say a lot, I apologize in advance.
What did you say?
What did I say? Okay. Also, I just want to let you know, I'm sitting here looking at a snowstorm out my living room window. So we have a big difference in weather, I'm sure, between Steve and America right now.
I'm looking at palm trees, blue sky, white clouds, and beautiful birds.
Ah, sounds beautiful.
We'll enjoy vicariously through you.
My little short story is that I spent the last couple of years with a lot of traumatic things happening in my life, and I kept, every time I would talk to God about it, which was frequently, he was always like, well, just walk through it, just walk through it, you know. And so I've walked through all these many, many different things in the last, well, 2.5 years, maybe 3. And what the thing that boiled down to for this particular experience was that when I was going through chemo and radiation, each time I would go in, I would get weaker and weaker. If you've all heard about that, it happened. And at one point, I remember kind of thinking, I made a wish, or I had a desire that I not have to pray. I was just too beat up and too worn down, too close to expiring, I felt, to take the time to pray. It was just, you know, a matter of existing at that point. But I made a wish, I made a desire. And in reading the book, Lessons in Derek Mitzvot Taka, the first volume, chapter 1, I found very, very difficult, and I was kind of laboring through it. And I quit, but I was carrying it around still the last year, and especially the last month. I would just carry the book around, but I wouldn't read it. But anyhow, what happened was that when I made that wish or that desire to not pray, it then began very slowly offering me the opportunity to not pray. So in the morning, then I would pick up the sitter, but I would play it praying, and it got worse. And pretty soon I wasn't even picking up the sitter. I was just listening to someone else in my life do prayers and rap to fill in and such. And until I wasn't praying at all, really. And what I felt, what it came down to just a week ago, it was about a week ago, that I just felt like there was something heavy on my chest, and that it was just keeping me from even lifting my arms. I just felt so heavy. It was almost like I felt like I had a twin sister looking directly at me, and we're breathing each other's breath. And this thing was just hanging on me. And what happened was that I realized by reading in the Mitzvah of Confession and Tshuva on page 55, it says, your evil will cause you anguish. And when I put out that desire, I didn't know that it would be called a sin or a klipa, but I created an entity of the soul of the klipa, according to this book. And it's written so simply for me, I can understand it. And so then in reading this, it says that when a person repents, he must kill the klipas mentioned above. So by the wish or by the desire, I make the soul, and then by doing the deed, you create the body of the klipa or the sin, and it gets heavier and it stands in front of you. And even King David talks about his sin is before him. It's always before him. And that's how I was feeling. I didn't have words for it then as I have words for it now. But so I was excited when I began to walk around in my apartment talking to God about what I had done and how I hated that, how I loathed that experience, that thought of saying, I don't want to pray. I loathed it. I mean, it was huge in my mind and in my heart, how much I loathed that, how much I despised that I had said that and created that. And then in so doing that, as I walked around, and I would call it now a confession to God or whatever you want to call it. And then I was reading, and it says that you do this, you confess it by just moving your mouth, that we don't really have to do anything physically except move our mouths to be able to say it. And so then I was able to share this with Zevi and a few other people. But what happened is that I felt so free, so incredibly free of all of this. and joyful and clean. I began to feel so clean, and I can understand when King David says, you know, that my sins are like red blood or red before you, even though it's red, that ye will make it white as snow for that particular entity or that thing. So the Klippas actually left, and it was quiet, and there was nothing going on. There wasn't a bang. There wasn't anything unusual. It just got quiet inside of me when that thing left. And so as I read these pages, it also says that it leaves like a cloud, that God says, I will cleanse you like a cloud. And so I was thinking about when I drive out here in the country, that it frequently has fog in the morning. And then as you drive a little ways and you watch the cloud, it rises and then it disappears. And so that's how I felt with this, is that it just disappeared. And so that is so phenomenal in my life. And the next morning I got up on Shabbat morning and I could read the Siddur and enjoy it and laugh and appreciate it. And it was sweet. It was so sweet. And then the next day it was so sweet, and I read everything. That's just yesterday. That's just, a week ago yesterday. But it's just it's like candy, only better. And so every day, it's so easy now to pick up the Siddur, to open it up, and to begin to read it and talk to God and use my own words in between the letters. And it's just a whole different life. And so I know that if this can happen to one little person with one little thing of not wanting to pray, and you think, somebody said to me, well, that's not a sin. I said, oh, you bet it is, because it cuts you off from God. And we don't want that as people who are searching to get closer to God and to help the world become a better place. We cannot afford to be cut off from God. And so I'm just so thrilled, because now I look at other things in my life and I'm putting it out there, things I'd like to see change, and asking for his guidance more. And I have a whole different relationship. So thank you for letting me talk.
Esti, first of all, I think you're a natural.
Why?
You're a natural.
Natural.
Second of all, I want to say that what you said is very, very profound. And when we had a chat on Thursday night, and as you said this to me, which if I can sum it up, it's,
yes.
When you have a negative desire, you have to basically, you have to loathe the desire. And so when you do that, what happens is you basically kill the soul of that desire, because everything in life is desire. We have a soul. And what is the soul? The soul is really a desiring machine. It just desires. So when, God forbid, we have a negative desire, what we do is we manifest that. We actually create a being, whether it's an angel or the opposite. It's called a demon, a negative. So when we manifest a good desire, that good desire helps us do the same thing again. That's what it says, char mitzvah mitzvah. The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. But if we manifest a negative desire, that's the problem with addiction. Okay, until you did it, you didn't want it. But once you do it, to get out of it is so hard. And that's the whole point with the idea of, unfortunately, with addicts, they call it hitting rock bottom. So how could they change? The whole life they're doing crazy things. How could they? Because right now they want to change. The desire in them now is not to have the drugs. So you see how everything is based on desire. And so when you told this to me Thursday night, I actually immediately did it with like 7 different desires. We all have things. We put up different desires. Let's say you had an anger, you had a lust, whatever it is.
Right.
And I was able to just use this trick, loathe the desire, hate the desire, despise it. Absolutely. I read it in the book. And then the other thing is what you do is you actually have to verbally say it. You have to verbally confess to God. You say, I am sorry for having this desire. And what that did, and I saw it, is it literally frees you, because what's happening is you're living with these desires. It's almost like you're heading out to California, but along the way, you put a little being next to you that says, actually, let's go to Oregon. And then you got another guy there that says, you know what? How about we go to Chicago? So it's like, of course, we're going crazy because we have all these little beings in us, the desires that we created, pushing us in different directions. But if you can kill the desire, and you basically say to that desire that, you know, not to the desire, what you do is you literally despise it, you hate it, and then that kills the desire, because what's a desire is you want it. So by despising the desire, you get rid of it, you get it out of your life. And then you say to God, I confess, or you say, I'm sorry for having that desire, because like he says, every desire doesn't only manifest a soul, a spirit, it also manifests the body of that spirit. So you then kill the body, and then you are free. I cannot tell you how this exercise, it literally felt like it took years of different weight off my shoulders. So I really recommend it. Steve, without further ado, can you share something, please?
My biggest thing to overcome was to give complete faith and trust to God. Complete faith and trust to God, and to be happy, and to understand that God is merciful, kind, and caring. To understand that what I just said a couple of weeks ago when Biden took office and everything was falling apart, what I thought was falling apart. And the news was coming and this was that. And I said to myself, I have to get away from everything. I have to shut off the radio. I have to shut off everything and just focus on what's happening. And I believe that every day when I read the Pasha, that it reflects and gives me information and tells me what to do. During all that time of my pains, I looked into the Pasha, and the Pasha was the last plague. And everyone went into their house and focused on what they were doing. So I closed myself in and I told my friends, please do not tell me anything more about the news. I don't want to know about the news. I want to concentrate on why I'm here on earth and focus on that. The next Pasha was basically about we're leaving Egypt and we're going across the sea. So the question was, there were a bunch of Jews that was talking about, one wanted to kill themselves, one wanted to fight, one wanted to pray. And what God said, just go forward. Don't worry about what's happening. Just go forward. Concentrate on what I told you to do. So I said to myself, that's what I have to do. I have to concentrate on why I'm here, to be happy, to be good, and to focus on that. Because as things were getting bad, I thought my feelings, things were getting bad. I started to vent out on my friends and family and stuff in a negative way. And I had to get rid of that. That was what the world was telling me, because I lived in two different worlds. I live in the religious world where I'm praying and focusing on Hashem and concentrating. And then I drop down into this real world and I'm being tested. It's like you learn the class and then you take the test. And this is the test that you take. And I was failing because I wasn't following the directions of what I was learning. So once I learned and focused and did exactly what I was supposed to do, everything worked in harmony. I didn't grow up that way. I grew up saying that my parents taught me to go to college, to go to school, to get a good job, to make a lot of money. And the more money that you had, the happier you're supposed to be.
Right.
And I believe that. And I was taught that. And I was brought up that way. And then I realized as I was working with celebrities that there were a lot of very, very, very rich people that were just unhappy. And I didn't understand why they were happy, because I was taught that the more money you had, the happier you're supposed to be.
Right.
And then I realized that happiness comes from within.
Yeah.
And there was a parable that this rabbi told me many, many, many years ago that I'm going to repeat now, and maybe we could all focus on it. There was an old mountain climber chipping away at the mountain. And he looked down and he saw the king and its horses and its royal stuff. And he said, that must be the most important thing in the world. So he became the king. And as he was riding in the carriage, the sun was beating down on him. And he said, that must be the most powerful thing. I was so uncomfortable. So he became the sun. And as he was the sun, the problem was that the clouds were getting in its way and blocking the races. So he said, that must be the most powerful thing in the world, and became the clouds. Except he was always getting pushed around by the wind. So he said, that must be the most powerful thing in the world, and he became the wind. And he would knock down the trees, he would knock down places, he would knock down everything, and he would bump into this mountain. And he couldn't knock it down, he had to go around. So he said, that must be the most powerful thing in the world, and he became this mountain. And as he was strong and proud that he was a mountain, he was being chipped away. And he had this pain in his side. And he looked down, and it was a mount. It was the mountain climber guy that was chipping away at him. So he became the mountain guy again. The whole idea of the story was that we have to look within to find happiness. We always look without to find happiness. But it really works from within. I really believe.
Steve.
Yes. So what happens is that money was very, very important to me. And I really believed when Steve Jobs died, I believe because he had billions of dollars, he was never, ever gonna die. I really believe that, truly. I believed if you need a new heart, whatever. And then I realized that money is not that important. And these are my 5 principles that I really believe and truly believe. Number 1 is believe in God. That's the number 1, believe in God. Number 2 is to be healthy. You have to stay healthy. And if you're healthy, then number 3 is happiness. Number 4 is family, friends, and appreciation. If you appreciate what you have and you have family and friends, then that's great. Number 5 is money. The way I got that is that if you believe in God, that's the most important thing. Health is more important than money. Obviously, because Steve Jobs had a lot of money, but he wasn't healthy and he died. If you're healthy, then you're happy. And if you're happy, then you could appreciate everything that you have. And it's so important. I know when I walk into the gym and I'm happy and I make other people happy, and even though sometimes my clients aren't happy, I become proactive and I'm still happy. And I know that they all say the same thing when they leave. You know, I'm a lot happier now than I was when I first walked in. And that's what we're supposed to do, is be happy and bring happiness and godliness into this world. It's the most important thing for all of us. And that's what I've learned.
Steve, that was amazing.
Zevi?
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I think that you beat Steve Jobs because you figured out what's most important. And I'm going to share what in my life, I think something that challenge that I overcame and something that I think a lot of people struggle with, which is anxiety. You know, anxiety basically something, God forbid, traumatizes us. So what is anxiety in the end of the day? Anxiety is that somewhere you feel unsafe. So let's say a soldier goes to war, so everything's good. But then let's say a bomb goes off. And so somehow he unfortunately now, basically anxiety is not in the head. In the head, you know you're okay. You're back in America. Anxiety is in the heart. In the heart, you're stuck with the fact that maybe, God forbid, you can die in an instant. So the point is anxiety is a heart issue. It's not a head issue. And so in order to overcome anxiety, you have to be able to basically go deep into the heart and realize that you are safe. And that's not so easy. And so something that really helped me was a meditation, if you want to call it that, or maybe a contemplation. Judaism, we're not that much into meditation. We're much more into transformation, right? It's not about feeling better. It's about becoming better. And so therefore, you know, the paths of Judaism, the mitzvahs and the ideas, if you want to call them meditations, are all just techniques on your infinite journey of always getting better. So be that as it may, right? Some other like philosophies are like, okay, we just got to meditate for the rest of our lives and we won't have any issues. Sure, you won't have any issues. You won't have anything to be proud about either. So the point is, in Judaism, we're trying to always progress. God is good, the world is good, but we have to bring out that goodness. That goodness may be within. We have to manifest that goodness. We have to always increase it. So the Baal Shem Tov says, if there is something negative, what you need to do is find the good in it. Because everything that comes from God, now nothing in this world, and this is also a good thing, a lot of the issues that we have today is because we have unrealistic expectations. We think that everything should be going well. Actually, if you're not getting harassed physically, mentally, emotionally, you're lucky. You know, most of the world goes through great difficulty. We're living in paradise. And so therefore, the thing is, if something negative occurs to you, try to see the good in the bad, because everything that occurs comes from God. Now, it's true on one hand, there may be something painful there because you had a different expectation. But if you can see the good in it, the blessing in it, then you can extract the good. And like we spoke about before, Esti, like you were saying, the bad can fall away, and then you can have a positivity from the very same event. The other thing that I think is very important in life, and this is very interesting, the Army has studies on this, and that is, they call it, everybody's heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD. But actually, it's not so simple. There's also called post-traumatic stress growth. So if you ask any of these guys that went through stress, and we're talking about serious stress, well, 5 years later, it's got to be about 5 years, would you give up that traumatic incident, that thing that like messed up your life, that like totally sent you for a loop? Would you give it up? They say no, because I learned so much from it. So ironically, it's those kind of, I was listening to a recording of the Rebbe said an amazing thing, and this is a principle. If we could just really wrap our heads around the way reality works, it will totally transform us. And that is that every time you go down, it's only so you can go up, right? If you want to jump, the Baal Shem Tov gives an example of a lion. He says before a lion's going to pounce, he has to crouch. You can't go fully like extra speed forward if you don't go extra speed backwards. So if you can wrap your head around the concept that this whole world is only a spiritual exercise to grow you. And what is growth? Growth means that today I'm like this. Tomorrow, I'm not going to be like this. I'm going to be a whole new person. So there has to be a break between the person you perceive yourself as now and maybe the person you really are now. And maybe that's a really good person. But even then, that has to break to make way so you can be an even greater person. Because you can't become greater than you are without leaving who you are. Now, none of us are going to leave a comfort zone. I don't care what you say, but anybody that's doing very comfort is one of the greatest addictions that we have, especially in the West where we're comfortable often. So often God has to take this little being and shake him up. And when you get shaken up, it's like you don't feel safe in your whole reality and what's true, and that guy did something and it wasn't fair. But eventually, and this has kind of been very, very well studied, it's not like, oh, it's just like a kind of, oh, somehow you just learned something, you get it. No, in the very darkness, we call it Yisrin ha'or min ha'choshech, the benefit of light from the darkness. It's within the darkness itself that you start to create a deeper reality. Because you can't get, if you're in light, you can't get a whole new level of light. Okay, maybe you could turn the same light on a little more. Let's say you know something good. Let's say study Torah. Okay, you can study a little bit more. But you can't transform yourself from the light. You have to go into the darkness. And in the darkness, that's when you can give birth to a whole new reality, a whole new light. So if we can understand this, this is the real process of life. So when something happens to us, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, why did God, not why did that person, if a person did something wrong, that's their karma, they may have to pay for it, whatever. But why did God do this to me? What is the lesson I can learn? Because Baal Shem Tov says every single thing that ever happens is teaching you a lesson in life. Everything. And so once we understand this, who am I? And this is the real truth. I am a divine soul that doesn't know that he is a divine soul. That is who I am. And why did the divine take a part of himself, a divine soul, and put it into a body in a universe that it doesn't know that it's a divine soul? So we can continuously expand and grow. Now, if you want to expand, you also have to contract. Because again, the only way you're going to have a whole new, the whole world is cycles of birth and death. You know, a seed gets born, and basically dies, it goes into the ground, it sort of disintegrates, and a new tree is born. So this is what we are. We are cycles of expansion. Oh, I got a spiritual idea and it grew me. And often we're like, it actually enhances my ego a bit. Wow, I'm so great. I just figured this out and I'm so much better. Actually, well, now, buddy, here, this is what's going to happen. You're going to contract. You're going to go back into the darkness. Why? Because there's a new growth. There's a new seed. There's a new expansion. And remember, there's infinite lessons. As Rabbi Freeman says, this world is God's classroom without walls. So everything that we go through is a predestined experience to teach us. Like Esti, you went through something very, very difficult. And it was actually a process. I know your journey with Yenemach, with cancer, etc., was years ago. So this has been going on for years. But the transformation that it occurred is so deep and so real. It's like we don't go through really deep transformations without kind of really deep traumas, because those are the things that really shake us out of our perception of reality. I want to conclude with this. I think a lot of what's going on in the world today, it's like a big shakeup, because Hashem is like really shaking up the very foundations of how, oh, we thought, okay, we're America, we have democracy, everything's good. It's not so simple anymore. And this shakeup makes us focus on what matters and what truly matters, as opposed to being in some kind of fantasy world, you know, just following some kind of crowd and et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to say, I mean, we've all shared beautiful things. Esther Chava, you shared a beautiful story about dealing with kind of body image and realizing, I think, that we're really a soul and we're here for deeper reasons. And Esther, you shared about how, you know, we can have, through a negative intention, we give birth to a spirit that lives with us and is constantly harassing us. It's saying, feed me more, feed me more. And you have to kill that spirit by basically despising it. That kills the soul, and then confessing to God, saying to God, I'm sorry for this desire, and that kills it. It's very real. And Steve, you are a celebrity trainer, and you've shared how you noticed that many of your very wealthy clients were unhappy, and that, you know, like from Steve Jobs, there was a wake-up call in your life that money does not buy you a new body, that you need to be like your 5 principles, which is faith, and which is health, and which is happiness and appreciation. And then the 5th principle, what was the 5th principle?
Was money. That was at
Money,
the
right.
end.
Yes, and that's true, because money is a very good thing if we use it for the right reasons, which is charity and doing mitzvahs and having, you know, peace of mind. So money is a wonderful thing as long as I write, you know, we are in charge of it and we're directing it. It's not just an addiction, so it's a great thing. And then finally, I'm sharing this idea of overcoming anxiety, which is through finding the good and the bad, and realizing that the anxiety itself is part of your journey in life, because you would never change. And we all have been through life, and our deepest changes occur particularly not in the light, because in the light you're happy and you'll just continue, but in the darkness, because that's where your deepest kind of, you're forced to reevaluate reality, and you come out of that a much smarter, wiser, better person. And so ultimately, I just want to say to the audience that if you have a spiritual war story, please share it. Other people, we all need to hear how you overcame a challenge. And if you want to, you could just put it in the YouTube reply. You're more than welcome to go onto my website, KabbalahLove.org, and you can send me a message. You can join us. Hopefully we'll have more sessions like this. This was actually an awesome session. I think a lot of great stuff came out of it, and maybe you could join us as a guest on our show. And so without further ado, if anybody has any, you know, kind of thoughts on what I said, if it triggered something, please feel free to share, and then we'll close it up.
I thought the most important thing is when darkness arrives is to have complete trust and give yourself over to Hashem. And if you give yourself over completely to him and you say he's merciful, kind, and caring, and he's going to take care of me, then I think everything else disappears. I remember this man, we were in a pool, and he was facing me and I was facing him, and his little 5-year-old boy jumps into the pool. And I said, wow, he just jumped into the pool. He didn't even know how to swim. And the father turns around quickly and grabs him. And I said, that's trust. That's real trust. He just jumped in because he saw his father and he knew that nothing was going to happen to him. And his father grabbed him. And that's what Hashem is. We have to jump in. No matter what happens, we jump in.
We jump in.
And we have trust.
Awesome,
Oh, yeah.
Steve, that's awesome. Anybody else have any comments on the concept that I shared that you would like to share about?
So you mentioned how meditation isn't something that is such a Jewish idea. It's more transformation. And I heard something once that we're not human beings, we're human becomings. And I, at least with Facebook or different inspirational quotes, I see a lot. I scroll through and I see these different quotes that are very uplifting, or I'll listen to different things and it's like kind of positive affirmations, and they're wonderful. But I think there's something so special about like what we're doing right now is like doing and like having a, rather than like meditating on ideas of like I'm a soul, like I'm a good person, I am beautiful, I have a purpose in this world, like actively unraveling it and figuring it out. And I feel like that's where like the deepest self-esteem comes. Like Rav Avraham Twersky recently passed away, and I read something of his, and he said that self-esteem comes from co-creating with God. Like God didn't make us perfect so that we could work with him to create ourselves. And that's where a healthy self-esteem comes, is like becoming.
I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
I really like that. Thank you for sharing it.
Sure. Yeah, it was helpful for me also.
Yeah. I like the thought of being a co-creator with God.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. And first of all, I want to thank all of our spiritual warriors here for joining us. Esther Chava, Esti, Steve. And also I just want to highlight what you said, which is this concept of we are human becomings. And we're always becoming more. And so we should never like get hung up, because I think a lot of our issues is that we had an identity that got crushed. But that's okay, because that gives birth. That's the darkness that allows you to become something new. In any event, everybody's, psychologists say that people change their identity every 7 years. So in any event, you're going to grow. So this is good. And the second thing is that, and I think you touched on something so, so important. And I see this in my own life. Self-esteem is a major issue. Some places, some countries, I lived in, kind of third world countries for a long time. Sometimes it's not an issue because they think that if they have money, they'll be happy. So it's like they don't even realize that that's not going to work for them. But we growing up in more prosperous places, and we don't have, we're not worried about, let's say, our next breakfast. So we know that money is not going to make you happy. But what will make you happy, and it is connected to self-esteem, it's actually doing good. Like you say, co-creating with God. And the more you co-create, the more good you do, the happier you'll become, because you'll feel proud of yourself. And that's the great secret of Judaism. Hashem tells us, go out, feed the hungry, feed the poor, do good, whether it's get married, have children, add to this universe. It's always about adding, right? And so all of that, ultimately, of course it's going to make you feel good because you brought goodness into the world. And so it's a different paradigm, like you were saying, that a lot of these other ideas, it's all about feeling good. So it's like you go to the psychiatrist, and I have this guy in our town, Jeff Greenapple. He's an amazing psychologist, really, really good. And he said that he told me that people would come into his office, they always walk out and they say, I feel better. But he said that, like, eventually he started to get into spirituality. He says, oh, okay, I feel better. But now what? There's got to be more than just feeling better in life. And that's where we do better, And when we do better, it's like a challenge. We're always challenging ourselves, and Hashem is challenging us to do better. You can always do more. You can always do more. And so that becomes an amazing kind of, even if you think about a kid playing a video game, why is he playing it? He wants to get to the next level. So we can always get to the next level. There's always another level ahead of us that we can strive to, we can push to, and that's going to make us better. It's going to make the world better. And that is the ultimate self-esteem, that, wow, we've actually achieved something. Because in the end of the day, there's only so long that you can just feel good about yourself. Okay, you did a meditation, you feel good. It says, Tainug Tmidi Ene Tainug. A constant pleasure is no pleasure. But if you're always kind of pushing yourself a little bit and you're doing more good, so then you can actually feel that extra goodness from here, extra goodness from there. So anyway, so that was just my comment on what you had to say, which as usual, very insightful, very beautiful. I want to wrap it up. I don't want to go too long. So if anybody has any closing remarks, go for it.
I would like to make one closing remark, and that is to Steve. Thank you for bringing out the darkness. I've been thanking God for the darkness, or I wouldn't have had this wonderful experience just lately. And so I really think I know perhaps what you're talking about. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to think more on that because I think that's very important. The crouch before the leap, the darkness before the new understanding, you know. But the darkness is scary and it's hard, but it's necessary. And for that, I'm grateful.
Thank you so much.
All right. So this concludes our first spiritual warrior session.
Yeah.
With God's help, we'll try it maybe once a week. And we invite the audience to come back next Sunday, check out the channel, and hopefully we'll have another one for you.